Marty was the only mother the little grizzly ever knew. He nursed her from the time she was a newborn cub. He devoted several years of his life to a crazy dream, to teach the little bear the ways of the wild, and then give her freedom in a mountain wilderness where grizzlies once thrived. Was it really possible? Would her love for her human mother make her an easy prey for hunters? Could she find a mate in mountains where no grizzly had been seen for many generations? Could a zoo-born bear survive in this harsh world? This is the story of Griz, a remarkable grizzly, and of Marty, a young nature writer who was the man who loved bears. In winter, these mountains are nature's harshest test of life. All living things exist in a state of jeopardy. Life is on the simplest of terms. To understand it here is to understand it everywhere. Despite the hardships, though, the wilderness is never devoid of life. Men have spent entire lifetimes in the wilderness trying to discover all that goes on, trying to understand mysteries, like the behavior of bighorn rams in mating season. The struggle is for food, for a chance to eat, and keep from being eaten. Relationships between species are complicated but important. Yet they are still largely a mystery to naturalists, and many species will be destroyed before we can completely comprehend. Ideas like this are what brought Marty Stouffer into these remote mountains of Colorado. He planned to spend a year making first-hand observations. As a nature writer, he wanted to live among the things he would write about. But then a chance meeting changed his plans. More than that, it changed his entire life. The story began with tracks in the snow.
It's easier to follow animals in winter, which is one reason I'm always looking for new tracks. But these, well, I just wasn't ready for them. They looked like they might be the tracks of a grizzly bear. In fact, I felt sure they were, only there were not any grizzlies in Colorado. Not a single one. I couldn't figure what it was, but it absolutely could not be a grizzly. Whatever it was big. The tracks were very fresh. There were coyote tracks too, which confused things even more. There wasn't a sound. I began to get spooked a little. I heard something and stopped to listen. Sure enough, the crunch of snow. I turned to have a look. A grizzly! I ran like crazy. I'd read about grizzlies thirsting for human blood. But he wasn't even chasing me. Later, when I knew grizzlies better, I realized he was just warning me that this was his territory. How could there be a grizzly here that nobody knew about? Did he wander in from up north? Or had he been hiding out for years? Somewhere out there was a wild grizzly, the last one in the whole state of Colorado. I was so excited I couldn't sleep at all, so I got out my books. Suddenly, I wanted to know the whole story of grizzlies, why there weren't supposed to be any left. What I read was pretty sad. In the last century, there were millions of grizzlies in the Rockies. Then came mountain men and trappers and cowboys and hunters, and they just killed them all. Every last one in the state, except the one I saw. I stayed up all night thinking. By morning, I'd come up with a plan. Might be crazy, but I was determined to try it. First, though, there was something I had to do.
It had to be important for Marty to make this trip. It was 18 miles from his cabin to the paved road, and that was only the beginning. Marty went straight to the zoo, and as you probably guessed, to the Grizzly Bears. There was no longer any doubt. The beast he'd seen was a grizzly. It made Marty sad to see these largest of all carnivores reduced to begging for peanuts. Marty had one more thing to do while he was here.
Oh, can you come around to the side door?
That's a grizzly?
Sure is. She's 6 weeks old already. You want to hold her?
Well, I don't know much about holding babies. Hello there, baby.
The trip back was quick. Marty doesn't like to hang around in cities very long. But he accomplished his mission. He proved to himself that the beast he'd seen was a full-grown grizzly. Now was the first part of his plan.
How about Shirley? No, you just don't look like a Shirley. Grizzly, Griz. Griz. You know, that's not bad. Griz. Here, Griz. You like that name, Griz? Dinner time, Griz.
And so it was that the newborn cub got the rather appropriate name of Griz. Also, on that day, she got a very dedicated human mother. In the remaining weeks of winter, Marty was to care for her with as much devotion as a human can bestow on an infant. It was part of Marty's plan, impossible as it seemed. But there never was a plan that didn't seem better after a good night's sleep. Next morning, Marty was up and out early as usual. Little Griz stayed in bed. Grizzlies are supposed to sleep all winter. In the wild, she'd be snuggled up to her 700-pound mother. But it was also nice and warm next to the big wood stove. At first, Marty couldn't concentrate on the wilderness world outside. He was thinking of the little cub back in the cabin. Was she all right, alone? Maybe he should go back. While these things were on his mind, he heard something. It was the old grizzly again. He'd found the carcass of a winter-killed elk. Marty thought of the helpless creature back in his cabin. Would she ever grow into anything as powerful as this great beast? When grizzlies are born, they'll fit in the palm of your hand. They're almost completely helpless, just as are human babies. Unlike humans, they are very smart when they grow up. Nature seems to take a longer time in the development of her highest creatures. But later, they learn a lot more than lower animals. They seem to depend less on instinct. Marty knew he had a lot to learn, too. How could he, a human being, presume to teach the ways of the wild to a young grizzly? Could he teach it where to hunt and fish?
My plan was simple enough, or so I thought. I wanted to restore grizzly bears to the Colorado wilderness, just the way they restock streams with trout and forests with deer. Only my idea was not for people to hunt and kill them, but to let them alone. To me, a wilderness isn't natural without big predators like grizzlies. It's hollow, like a ghost town. When I discovered that old male grizzly, I was happy. I thought that my plan would be practical. I had found him a mate. Now, to let nature take its course. There'd soon be a new dynasty of grizzlies in Colorado. How about it, little girl? You grow up big and beautiful, because I've got a boyfriend for you. By the end of February, I took her outside for the first time. I had to. She was making a wreck of the cabin. Her curiosity got her into everything. first, she was a little confused by the snow, but she quickly learned to love it.
When spring came, Marty began to introduce Griz to the wild world which surrounded them. Within the few months until autumn, Griz would have to get to know intimately some 75 square miles of wilderness mountains and all the creatures native to it. Fortunately, Griz was a student on the fast track. Marty began to feel somewhat intimidated. The other wilderness mothers were so adept, so unquestioningly sure of what they were doing. The young, too, seemed secure in their parents' care. Hawk babies were fed on the same food that nourished hawks for millions of years. A fawn knew to stay very still and invisible when its mother was not near. But what did Griz know? What could he teach her? The 2 or 3 dozen facts which he'd read in books? Griz was obviously very smart, but what good was intelligence if he didn't know what to teach her? Or worse yet, if he taught her something wrong. Marty suddenly realized that curiosity and intelligence were her best teachers. Griz was a very curious bear.
Even though Griz was still mostly on the bottle, I was trying to get her interested in other food. I had read that grizzlies eat roots, but what roots? I'd just dig some up and try them on her. Either I guessed wrong, or she wasn't ready for wild turnips. But she loved to dig. Just taste it, Griz. How do you know you don't like it? Stop it, silly. Don't play with your food. It got warmer, so Griz and I went up to Timberline, where there was still lots of snow. Come on, Griz! Hang on! Don't be scared. Bear experts have told of seeing grizzlies watching beautiful sunsets. Griz was definitely more interested in other things. She was totally dedicated to one thing, satisfying her curiosity. That was as it should be. The more territory she got to know, the better off she would be.
Marty began to see more clearly that Griz would almost certainly be able to take care of herself in the wild. There was only one thing a grizzly need fear: man. He would have to teach the cub to fear all human beings. Otherwise, she would be caught or killed by trappers or hunters.
Quiet, Griz. Shh. Run, run! Hide from bad people. Hide, Griz, hide!
The season got warmer, so Marty and Griz moved into a primitive lean-to at a higher altitude. Griz was now able to go off exploring by herself. There were dangers, of course, and most of them Griz solved herself. This time, Griz wandered a long way from home, to the top of the ridge. What's that? A fresh hole? The Griz, it smelled like something to eat. Griz had never seen a badger, so she wasn't ready for such a temper tantrum. She was so frightened, she was in the water before she realized she'd never tried to swim before. But it's easy for a grizzly.
Hey, Griz. Come here. Come on. You smell something, Griz? You scared? What is it? Griz, nothing's wrong. Don't run. Come back here. Oh, well.
Griz had smelled something that frightened her badly, and in a moment Marty would understand. It was a bear tree. Those were claw marks made by a grizzly. Their meaning to other bears was clear. It meant keep out, no trespassing. So that's why Griz ran away. Marty had not paid attention to the bear tree warning, so the old monster delivered the message in person. Stay out seemed to be the general idea. But Marty did not stay out. He followed the old boy for a mile or so. Only this time, he was more careful. The grizzly was busy fishing. Marty watched, fascinated. It seemed safe, so Griz came sneaking up to watch.
Hey, look, Griz. Pay attention. You need to learn his tricks.
They watched for a long time, fascinated. It was the first grizzly the cub ever remembered seeing.
That's the next thing you need to learn, Griz. How to fish. On the way back to camp, we spotted some mountain goats, high up on a cliff. We started to climb.
Mountain goats have survived the high altitudes because no one else can get at them. Even humans have trouble, and for a young grizzly, it may be impossible. Griz is very sure-footed. All bears are. But this rock is loose. It just slides out from under her. Maybe the rock's more solid here, eh, Griz? Marty climbed on up. The mountain goats wouldn't wait. He kept a watchful eye on Griz down below. The goats had kicked some rock loose. Griz hears it, but what can she do? From up above, Marty had seen that Griz was making the right moves to avoid disaster. He felt pretty good, knowing that she was so alert and self-reliant.
Next week, Griz continues her great adventure, exploring the Colorado Rockies and meeting the other creatures of the mountains. Still, Marty wonders if the friendly little cub will ever be able to survive on her own. She must know the ways of the wild if she's going to make it. So Marty teaches her how to travel the creeks and streams, where to find food, what to avoid. During the summer, she survives many of nature's dangers only to face the greatest danger of all. As the leaves turn golden, Marty and Griz spend more time together. But this happy time is tinged with sadness. Soon, man and bear must part as Griz goes to a den to sleep away the winter, and Marty goes deeper into the mountains to study other wildlife. So, like a good grizzly mother, her foster parent shows her how to dig a den. What kind of world will she find when she wakes up next spring? Will the grown-up Griz need or even recognize her old friend? Join Marty and Griz next week for the heartwarming conclusion of this true wilderness tale. Until then, enjoy our wild America.